Hello Whovian subscribers and YouTube. Be warned, because this most definitely is going to be more of a rant than a review of In the Forest of the Night. This episode was also penned by a new writer to the series, but unlike Jamie Matheson, this episode ultimately ended up being extremely disappointing. Before I get into why I didn't like this episode, let me start off by saying that I do admire the idea behind the story, although I do think it may have been littered with plot holes, which I'll get into in a moment. Nevertheless, the idea of a forest springing up overnight to protect a planet from a solar flare is quite intriguing. But it kind of makes you wonder why this didn't happen in the Rebel flesh. Apart from the incidental music being used fairly sparingly and there being little shaky cam, most of what I have to say is negative. So let's get this over with. The main problem with this episode is that virtually everything in it was completely irrelevant or completely useless and served no purpose in being in the story whatsoever, other than maybe getting some cheap gasps from the audience. Foremost is the children. I can see no apparent reason for including them in this story. They did nothing more than tag along anytime the main characters had to move to a new location, and maybe act like annoying brats in the TARDIS. Overall, they didn't contribute anything to the plot, and if we re-examine the sequence of events and have Danny Pink leave the museum by himself without having any kids in the story, it would have made no fucking difference. Even more irrelevant is the introduction of Maeve's mother, who literally did nothing in this entire episode except maybe bitch at somebody on the phone and ride a bicycle through the forest. By the way, wasn't she supposed to be on her way to pick up Maeve? Why the fuck would she be riding a bicycle to do that? What, you're gonna make your daughter walk home alongside you while you ride a bike? Thanks, Mom. Once again, I can see no reason for including this character in this story. In fact, it's blatantly obvious that the only reason this character was even introduced was to set up the two heart-wrenching scenes for this episode. Whenever she finds Maeve, and whenever she and Maeve arrive home and discover that Maeve's older sister, who's been fucking missing for months, has suddenly reappeared out of a vanishing bush for no fucking apparent reason. What does any of this have to do with this episode's fucking central plot? Nothing! We can effectively remove all the children, Danny and Maeve's mother, from the story and it still fucking works. So again, why were these characters included? Now to the character of Maeve. Just like all the other children in this episode, it was completely unnecessary for this character to be a child. Maeve's purpose was to serve as a medium between the Doctor and the trees, so casting an adult in this role wouldn't have detracted from the story at all. Maybe it would have seemed far less fairy tale-ish, but damn, isn't that what Moffat's been saying would happen this season? So instead of having the character of Maeve as a schizophrenic child, why couldn't she have been a fucking schizophrenic adult? You're writing children into this story for no reason other than to just have them in the story. Just because it's a show for kids doesn't mean it has to be about kids, you fucking moron. This shit belongs on the Disney Channel, not Doctor Who. While I'm talking about irrelevancy, this episode once again insults my intelligence by showing me an image of the Earth completely covered in a green forest, which will be fucking impossible near the equator and the poles, and then beats me over the head with news anchors frantically reporting about how their cities have been covered in forest. No fucking shit! I kind of figured that out when you showed me that image of Earth completely covered in forest. Yet another completely irrelevant scene are the fucking wolves. I realize that it's an attempt to nod to fairy tales like Red Riding Hood, but holy fuck! That entire sequence was not only completely irrelevant, but it didn't further the plot at all. And if that wasn't enough, the wolves are scared off by a fucking tiger, who's then warned off by a damned flashlight. After the solar flare has come and gone, the forests magically disappear, leaving all of the city streets and concrete completely intact, not so much as a crack in the pavement. Maybe I'm being too harsh on this episode, but it feels like this one was intended to be Flatline's opposite in terms of tone, While that episode was rife with death and scary monsters, this episode was all happy feel-goods. I don't know what else to say. I hated it. I couldn't take it serious, what with all the kids in it. Stop writing children into stories. I don't think I'm willing to say it's as bad as Love and Monsters, but it's definitely one I won't be in a hurry to see again anytime soon. Is it the worst of this season? I don't know. It'd be a close race between this one and Robot of Sherwood, but I would rather sit through The Caretaker 5 times than have to sit through this episode once more. Next week is the first part of the 2-part finale, and it looks like it's going to be filled with typical Moffat trends. I guess we'll see. Maybe he'll surprise us. But I doubt it. See you next week.